recorded live.
Welcome, everybody, to the Genesis Science Fiction radio show. It's a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. I'm your host, William Hayashi, and this is the July 24th, 2015 edition. And our special guest today is Donovan Vim Crony. Is that right? Did I say that right? Vim?
That's exactly right, yeah.
And he's a fellow movie maker. He's also an illustrator, photographer, musician, and I'm sure we're probably only scratching the surface, but I want to thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, William, for having me. And like I was saying earlier, Jarvis as well, this is a total honor, and I'm super excited. I've been a fan of the Black Science Fiction Society and the Genesis Radio and the magazine, so I'm super excited to be on, yeah.
Very cool. By the way, what part of the country are you coming to us from?
I'm in Long Beach, California.
And what's your weather like?
It is extremely hot. It's actually kind of crazy and all over the place. It was like raining yesterday, and we've had some power issues in downtown Long Beach, so it's been like rain and heat and power issues and heat and some more rain, so it's been a little crazy.
We're not seeing any of those signs of the apocalypse yet, are we?
It's funny you say that because, I saw some people downtown kind of screaming that the world is ending and, all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yes. All my folks, like the Japanese half of my family, they're all north of you. They're all in the Bay Area and San Francisco. And I don't know how it's been lately because I haven't been out there, but apparently they're not as badly drought-ridden as, the southern part of the state. And then, I just turned on the news just a couple of days ago. I see, the torrential rain, and, of course, the ground wasn't really ready for it because it was too dry. So, I mean, it's got to be a trial to live there now when you have such extremes happening, almost daily.
Yes, exactly.
Well, anyway, let's get started with the important stuff. I mean, it's nice to find out where people are in the weather, but one of the things, look, I don't live there. Sometimes you talk to somebody and I talked to somebody in Colorado and they got, they just passed the marijuana thing, and so that was a big issue for them. So you kind of, all of those things affect who the people are because they kind of change your environment or at least affect your environment. So, I mean, Long Beach sounded pretty nice, but now what you're telling us is we're getting such extremes that it's not the hangout or vacation haven it used to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice. It's just at this moment in time, it's a little odd. Just, literally right now I'm looking out of my office and then people are walking by with umbrellas on because it's like blazing hot. And,
right.
So it's just kind of like, okay, and it was raining like a couple of days ago, and yeah. And how long have you lived there? I've been here for 7 years now.
And where'd you grow up?
I grew up, born in Bakersfield, California, grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and two pretty hot places, pretty interesting places to grow up and live in. Yeah, Las Vegas fooled me, and excuse the quick digression. I went and I officiated a wedding
right after Christmas, and it was so deceptive. Yeah, I had my Chicago, long coat with me and everything, but when we're landing, you see all of this desert vegetation. And then I got out of the airplane, and it was like 39 degrees. So, my eyes didn't match up with what the temperature was. And they said, well, this is kind of usual weather. So, I mean, there's still seasons and stuff like that, but probably less so where you guys never get snow, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe once every 3 years there'll be like this.
Yeah, but it doesn't
anomaly.
stick or anything. It's like, they're not making snowmen and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So, all right, let's talk about your early years because we kind of want to figure out, what it was that got you into the creative bent that you are now. I would guess probably as, in elementary school you weren't really a filmmaker, but were you an artist back then or a musician early in life? How did your creativity kind of bust out on you?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think my mom, she would always bring up this story of just like when I was 2 years old, the first time I picked up a pencil, it was like the correct way.
Right.
She was totally taken aback by that. But so I've been drawing all of my life, and just kind of being inspired by, my family, the world around me, movies and television for sure, especially at a super young age, starting from like something like Sesame Street to, cartoons, Thundercats and Ninja Turtles and things like that. So I've been drawing forever, and I definitely kind of had this mindset and interest in animation. And I just, throughout my life, I just continued to draw and to try to like build and develop more skills within that form.
Right.
But as I got a little bit older, I just kind of I found myself going to the movies like all the time and just kind of really cherishing that experience. Growing up in Las Vegas, it was, I was in that kind of like, I was born in '83, so I was kind of in that era of a lot of drive-in theaters, a lot of arcades and things like that. So I really just appreciated that moment in time. A lot of video stores and kind of being a kid in the aisle of a video store and looking at the covers of like VHSs and things like that. So I kind of got pulled in that filmmaking direction. I don't want to ramble too much. If you
No. If you start going too crazy, I'll haul you back. But I mean, it's really important that early part of one's life, because if you have a creative bent and you are encouraged by it, some very good things happen with you, especially when you're encouraged to draw, or you're encouraged to sing, or play an instrument or whatever. There's kind of a self-reinforcing thing that goes on that instills, I would say, good habits in you early. So let's say you pick up that pencil, you obviously looked at how other people were holding their pencil, and you mimicked it instead of just choosing your own way, and so you become an artist. And the whole thing about film, you were born just after the video revolution. The video revolution actually started in 1976. And two things happened in 1976 to explode that whole industry. And the first one is the most significant financially, and that was when people realized that they could get adult content for their home to view at home. That's what drove the video revolution. It's also what drove the Internet revolution in 1992, when people discovered that, there's all kinds of sexual content on the Internet, and sex drives a lot in our culture, a lot in this country. But for you, when you're walking up and down those aisles looking at those tapes, were you drawn to the artistry of the boxes, or were you drawn to certain kinds of movies? What do you think it was that kind of started to percolate through for you?
I was totally drawn to the artistry. I mean, I think it's a huge thing, and I know there's even like articles and blogs and Tumblrs that kind of have like old VHS artwork and kind of that style, that painterly style. So as a kid, looking at that stuff, what really caught my attention is the sci-fi stuff, essentially. Not only sci-fi, but some of the horror, or some of the stuff that was kind of like cross-genre horror, sci-fi, Hellraiser, Critters, things like that. That really kind of like I kind of need to watch this to figure out what it's all about. And
Well, it sounds like it's the images of the unreal. Imagery that is not based in what we would reasonably call reality seems to have piqued your interest.
Yeah, definitely. I something else now that I think about like my childhood and things. Another thing that was really kind of crucial in how my brain was forming and how I was kind of like seeing the world and seeing my art was through video games. And my ability, especially at that time, because video games weren't as graphically intense as they are now. But so when I was a kid, I felt like, now that I think about it as an adult, I feel like it was a lot easier to kind of project myself onto certain characters. And so I feel like within video games, and cartoons, there's like this video games, cartoons, movies connection, this like pyramid that because there's like this ability to kind of drive a narrative through video games and also through cartoons, of course. And it's funny that I mentioned like Thundercats and Ninja Turtles because as a young black man, it was kind of like easier to kind of project my experience onto these characters because there was no kind of like race thing applied to them. It was just kind of
right. It wasn't like tracked into, you didn't have typical white features or a face or something like that.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at all of these things. I mean, you had the affinity for sci-fi movies, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror movies, right? And you watched those because you were judging a film by its cover. I'm sorry?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah. And what was kind of like your thinking? Were you absorbing the difference of not real, as kind of like the foundation of your creativity?
That's such a heavy question. I think and I've been interested in the ability through especially film to make the not real.
Right.
Through just the act of creating it and sharing it with people. I think that's something that I've kind of like a subconscious philosophy of how I make my work now. It's like I would say that anything that I create, any drawing, any film, any character, I'm like, this is real. And I know people have talked about this, like if you can think of it, maybe you've actually manifested this thing somewhere in the universe. And I'm sure there's a film in there somewhere about that. But so that's kind of how I walked throughout that mode of living, creating. Was just it's real.
Yeah. So okay. So I mean that's a pretty early start, and that's pretty cool. By the time you got into your teens, let's say mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, around then, where were you in terms of creative output? Did you go to a school that gave you the opportunity to maybe look at to get into photography or the drawing, the illustrating, the artwork, even film, or even to be a musician? I mean, where were you in your teens?
Well, I was really fortunate just to have a really supportive mother, and she's always just been kind of driving the art with tools and colored pencils and paper and things like that. So I was going into my teens, like junior high school, and kind of like realizing that, well, not realizing because I'm probably a little too young, but sensing that there's some sort of a direction I should probably be going. There were some ambassadors from a high school. At the time, it was called Votech High School, Southern Nevada Votech High School, and they did vocational education there, and they had a course for 2D and 3D animation, and this is kind of like mid to late 90s, and I was just really drawn to that, and they just seemed like they were having a blast, and so I got the paperwork, I applied to the school, and I got in. So I was kind of in that mode. I kind of really picked back up like the art and was going in the direction of more of an animator, and really studying 2D Flash animation and 3D animation via like Lightwave and Maya and things like that at the early stages. And this is kind of just when Toy Story and things were kind of coming around. But I kind of lost your question a bit, but I feel like in the teenage years, I kind of got another interest, well, I guess this makes it for then, of music, and kind of going back. I feel like there's a lot of teenagers that do this. You end up with music going back and into the like early catalogs of everything from like rock and roll and Motown, and listening to all the old music, and then also the current stuff at that time in the mid-90s. But I was just really drawn into hip-hop and rock and roll. And I started playing guitar, and that definitely became an attribute to my art style. And I feel like as of now, I've been definitely kind of like a visual director. I've done a lot of music videos and things like that. Yeah, so music, my teenage years for sure, like just tons and tons of music. And at that time, it was kind of, internet was really becoming super accessible, and Napster and MP3s, and it was like download as much content as possible and just absorb it all.
You know what the secret of Napster that rarely gets out is the fact that two different universities, and I forget which ones, people can go and look them up, but two different universities found, upon analysis of the behavior of people who downloaded frequently, those people purchased more music than people who didn't download. Because what Napster did was, like, if I went and looked on your computer and looked at the music you had, which is what Napster allowed you to do, to look at a user's catalog, and I saw that not only did you like what I liked, but you liked these other things that I hadn't heard of or I hadn't heard, the chances were very likely that I would check out what you had and then go and buy that, because you would, it's better than obviously listening to the radio. The radio is a very, very closed environment for listening to music and learning about new things. Yeah. And so actually Napster was a contributing factor to at least the last gasp of CD purchases, and then everything went digital. And when you talk, the other thing, and this is just kind of from a personal perspective, when you talk about how you really liked looking back in the oldies catalog, I feel even older because, of course, that's the music I grew up with. So thank you for that. I appreciate that, Donovan. Thanks. Now, did you when you did you mention you picked up guitar?
Yeah. So I picked up what's that?
Go ahead.
I picked up a guitar at 17. And I just, it just, for me, it was it came super natural. I bought like just a starter kit guitar with a little amp. And, there's something about that. I mean, there's so many connections that I can make between like music and my approach to music and just my love for playing music. I love how, it's an instrument. Everything's tactile, and I feel like even the music that I'm drawn to is very tactile, or it has a lot of texture. And so when I make films that contain music that's like that, I have almost like this need to be very like high touch, hands-on, create costumes, like everything has to have this kind of like vibration of creation for me, and
yeah, and it has to resonate together for you to feel good about it, or for you know, I mean, are you looking at a resonance where everything kind of hangs together?
yes, that's yeah, totally. that's totally my thing, is this kind of like, yeah, this resonance where everything hangs together. When I watch my films now, especially the two, the XARA, YAOCIHUATL, and Noise Gate, it just kind of, for me, it just feels good to watch them, and I like this. I like this idea of a film working in the way like a song can work, where you can kind of listen to a song over and over again. And yeah, so that's kind of been my practice.
Wow. Okay, so you pick up a guitar, you start learning. It sounds like you learned music more organically than you did from like structured classes. I had structured classes. First they started, here you have to learn your chords, and you have to learn your folk music because it's easy, you can play it solo, blah blah blah. And then, it wasn't very organic at all. It sounds like yours was driven from the inside. Mine was my parents sending me down to Harper Court to go to to go to guitar lessons. When you got into that music and it started permeating inside of you, and you broadened your horizons by looking at historically what was good pop music, what was good rock, what was good, and then that kind of coalesced inside you. How old were you when you started, externalizing, what it was that you had been learning, what you had been absorbing? Were you a performer at all, or was it for production? How did that music manifest itself for you?
It took me a few years. After I left high school, moved back to California from Las Vegas, met up with some people, and basically moved into this punk house, and lived and worked in Bakersfield, California from 18 to 22, and within that time, I continued to play music very heavily, like on a daily basis, because my roommates were all musicians. They were all in bands. They all worked at a record shop. And within that time, it was magical for me, because it was that situation plus a lot of just like road tripping, and seeing bands, going out of town, going to Sacramento, going everywhere, and just watching bands, and that kind of inspiring more stories within me, because it's like, the best music is like so theatrical. The best performers are so theatrical. James Brown, it's like, it's just you're watching this story on stage. It's not just you're listening to songs or anything like that. So through that, I began, after I kind of got my lesson in the world of like music and rock and roll and things like that, I started composing my own music, and I just kind of had this idea of, and I had seen this done before, but kind of more in a spectacle sense, where bands, musicians would use projection. I wanted to do it in a way where, and I was very heavily involved in like doing documentaries and things like that. So I wanted to kind of show the world around me, and I would document my family and my friends and just kind of aspects of life. And it was almost very karaoke-esque. So I would project this documentary, kind of a short documentary vignette with the lyrics that I'm singing. And it was all very kind of like heavy industrial, weird industrial sounds.
Right.
And there would be a projection of like maybe my grandmother. I grew up in Bakersfield, for the most part in this yellow house that my grandmother owns, and it's something that's very close to me. So I'm like, I'm going to share this in a song and share her perspective on the world and how she loves to decorate the house and things like that. So that would be a song, there would be lyrics, and that's what I was kind of doing for a while. And I did self-published an EP, and ever since then I've been kind of going back and forth between video and music, but just in a kind of different approach. More recently, I've been kind of like tapped on the shoulder by the universe to do more of that, because I really, especially through social networking and Facebook and all this stuff, I've met up with so many people all around the country, all around the world, but I kind of want to connect with in like the real world. So I'm in love with the idea of touring and things like that. So I want to start doing music again, put out a record, like an actual vinyl record, because it's that idea of tactile vibration sounds, and and get back to playing some music.
The sonic qualities of vinyl have been proven to be more superior. I mean, I like vinyl. I'm looking over here to the right of me, and I'm looking at about 5,000 albums right now. Albums have a better sound, and you're right. There's a lot more tactile sensation to it. The only problem with it is you have to translate it to digital so people can take it with them on the go.
Totally.
Yeah. So, all right. So you've got that. You're back and forth with that. You mentioned that you've done a couple of music videos, you said?
Yeah. I've done a lot of music videos for like underground bands and artists and things like that. So.
And so it seems like, for you to do that, you're one step divorced from the music yourself. Obviously you get to present it, but you're putting together someone else's music. For you as a filmmaker, or at least as a videographer, what are the what kind of drove you, other than your early love for movies? I mean, you got into it fairly early, and it sounded like you got into it at the exact right time, because you were offered, you were in the era of video tools that were not exorbitantly expensive. I mean, it wasn't like you had to, cut and splice film and develop and time and things like that. But was it the ease of digital tools that made filmmaking accessible and desirable for you to kind of get into?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, that was totally the draw. I would go to stores, and electronic stores specifically, and see mini DV tapes or mini DV cameras that were very much within my reach, to work in my little comic book or movie theater job and save up and buy a camera and then just start shooting and figuring out the process of how, I can shoot, and then capture onto my computer. And my computer is a little too slow. I've got to maybe upgrade that. But everything was kind of like within that realm of like, it's totally possible for me to do that. And even more so now for everyone else. I'm talking on this phone, but the phone also shoots like 4K video, and it's I was right at that moment to where things became extremely accessible. Going to college, I went to Cal Arts to study film for 4 years, and it was kind of funny to me just because I was opened up to a lot of things at Cal Arts, but
right.
It was interesting to hear other students with maybe families or a parent or something that was a filmmaker, and they kind of grew up shooting film or shooting Super 8, and that just kind of being like totally like beyond me, and having an interest in it, totally having an interest in like that, because even that is very like it's chemical, physical. I love film. It just wasn't something that was within reach at the time. It still isn't, because it's still kind of expensive. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you get into those kind of hobbies, and then which turn into much more, you're still. I mean, there is an upfront cost. I mean, it's like buying a good guitar or a drum set. Oh my God. When I think about what I spent on a drum set back then, in today's dollars, people would look at me and go, "Well, why aren't you out every day, trying to make back your investment?" So, anywho, talk about your first, what you would consider your first successful project, your first successful video project of your own. What was the subject of it, and what was the genesis of the idea that kind of put it together?
My first successful project was a documentary, and it basically, I had moved from Las Vegas to Bakersfield. I had acquired a mini DV camera in Las Vegas before I left, and another philosophy of mine has just always been one of the reasons why I love film and the process of film production is I love connecting with people, and so at that time I would ride the bus a lot, and I would always just see interesting people or even start up conversations with people all the time. And so I felt like this could be an interesting opportunity for me to just talk with people and actually document them on the bus. And so it was about 25 minutes, and I just ran into all these really amazing characters. Just totally different people from all walks of life, and it included music from a local band. So that was probably like the first time I had ever done something like that. But yeah, it was an experience. A lot of learning how to transition shots and how to kind of like the proper way to input titles and things like that. I mean, it's tough. It was tough, but it's kind of one of those learning things.
Well, I mean, again, you learned it organically rather than going to school. Did you take any classes in filmmaking, by the way, along the way?
In high school, I was more focused in. It was 2D and 3D animation, and there was a TV production part of the school, and I had a lot of friends in that. But that just wasn't. It wasn't a film course. It wasn't focused on narrative. It was more like, sit behind a desk, and it was more journalistic than anything else, and that just didn't interest me at the time. So yeah, no film courses, just buy a camera from the defunct Circuit City. Is Circuit City still around? And,
yeah.
And just teach myself, and it was a process.
Okay, so I mean, you're self-taught practically everywhere. Did you take art classes for your drawing in school?
No.
Exactly. So it sounds like you. I mean, it sounds like you're very self-motivated, and also self-motivates to an extent where you want to, dig down into the nitty-gritty of whatever it is you're learning, and it also sounds like you want to excel at it. So you've got all of this drive going for you, and you're fairly young at that. I mean, obviously at that time you were a lot younger. About when did this kind of transition in your head go, or was it even early on, where you said, not only do I like this sort of thing, but I could conceivably make a living at a lot of these different things? When did you start looking at it from a business perspective, where you were, looking to maybe, I mean, my dream obviously is I would love to be able to live off of my art, okay? I would love to be able to write and just write screenplays and books and not have to go out and get viruses off of really stupid-ass people's computers. When did you start looking at the business aspect as something where, you know, you might be making a living off of it, or you might be doing it exclusively?
You know, that actually didn't come until much later, probably 25.
Okay.
Just getting out of school, just getting out of CalArts, and because before that I was very much again about just community and being around people and just helping out as much as I could with projects and things like that, like music videos and documentaries and things. But it didn't come later until, you know, you finish school and you get your first apartment and you got to pay those bills. That's when it kind of clicked.
Yeah.
I should probably charge something for these services, because, you know, it's for anybody out there that's listening that's kind of at that point, you know, it's a skill that you take a lot of time to develop, and yeah, it's not like everyone is doing that, doing videography, doing writing, doing illustration and things like that. So those are really important things. So yeah, it took me a while. But I've been kind of just through this eternal struggle just to kind of find the balance of like wanting to share those abilities with the world, and also I've been teaching on and off for the past 8 years, mostly like junior high to high school students, but I've recently been kind of offering up my services to adults as well, because I think it's so important that we're able to have the tools to be able to tell stories with all this technology that's kind of taking over our lives right now. And and it's just an amazing experience. And there's so many people with amazing stories. When I go to see my family, it's just amazing to like sit and hear them talk, because they're like the best storytellers ever. And it's like, why aren't you a filmmaker? You know?
Yeah.
It's just that the people just don't have the tools and to do that, and not just kind of like actual equipment tools, but just like the kind of like educational resources to be able to like have to hit record and then save it onto my hard drive, and then it's a lot. But
well, you know, you make a very good point. You know, a lot of people would love to be able to do things, but I have found that the majority of people I meet would love to do X, and then when I ask them, well, why aren't you doing X? And yet, you know, what they do is they describe the acquisition of skills, or maybe, you know, spending the money for certain equipment and things like that as a barrier to achievement. So, you know, it's not, you know, having the desire is I don't even think it's part A. I think it's part sub A, because, you know, everybody has a desire to do something, and I think that most people want to do something creatively, but it takes, like you know, you're almost completely self-taught, and what does that require? Well, that requires you to A, determine what it is that you wanted to do, B, figure out, well, what do I have to do to be good at it, and then C, actually do it. Okay, I'll give you the best example in the world about how people can't change their personal ethic in terms of getting things done. Everybody knows they have to eat right and they have to exercise, okay? So how many people do it after 40? How many do it after 50? How many do it after 60? You know, if you don't develop that ethic early, and keep yourself in the habit of learning, of striving, of trying, of even engaging in something that's not in your wheelhouse. Dude, I mean, you are so you're an outlier in terms of life. You're out there at the part where somebody says, geez, man, I'd love to learn how to love to learn how to play the guitar. And then you get a guitar and you learn how to play it, and then you play with other people. Well, I don't think not one in 100,000 people will do that. So, don't undersell anything that you've done, because it is rather remarkable. Most people, as they're sitting there listening to this show, either live or as a podcast, I'm presuming, because I know myself, everybody has a dream where they would love to have been able to do X, or they missed the opportunity to do Y, or, man, they give anything to do Z, and the barrier to doing it is actually doing it. So, I mean, when you look at you're an illustrator, you're a musician, you're a filmmaker, and you're more than those things, because to do all of those things successfully, you're a photographer. You have to have skills in so many other areas. So don't ever sell yourself short and say, well, it was just something I did. What you did was pretty remarkable.
I super.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I super appreciate that. Also, this is something that's kind of like, I feel very passionately about, and passionately to the point where I would love to change this, for the world to change this. And I feel like this change is happening, but I feel like that drive, and it's not entirely because of this, because sometimes people they might say they want to do something and then they just don't do it, and it's just all on them. But
right.
Part of that, I feel like I was really lucky. Like, I happened to be involved in the right things or watch the right things at the right time in my life. Part of that is like, I feel like perception, and people's perception of themselves and how the world is perceiving them. And this can apply to like all people of color, especially. But I just wish that, I feel like this whole journey could have been a lot easier if I maybe saw more like black filmmakers on TV, or more black scientists, or more black animators, like up front, at the forefront of everything, and being like, oh, I can do that, because I didn't see that. Actually, I kind of stumbled upon it, through, I mean, the obvious is like Spike Lee, but we're in there, I guess, through, like, because I love like puppetry, and like especially some of like the darker Muppet stuff, but like Kevin Clash and things like that, and kind of seeing like those avenues to take in life.
Right.
I really feel like a lot of people don't get that, and it kind of stifles their ability to go in that direction, especially specifically for black women. And more recently, that's changing. I mean, we're having a lot of black women directors come up, which is amazing. But it really starts, and it's just so kind of like typical. It really starts when you're like when you're young, when you're a kid, and we need to kind of push that for all of our youth to be like, look at this person doing this, and it's possible, and here are the tools to do this also, and if you're interested in it, we can go further with that. If not, we can find something else, figure out what else, I don't know if that's happening as much as it should. The idea of visibility and opportunity within like the black community, as far as us doing all these different things. I mean, we for sure, in my comic book mind, we just need more black superheroes. That's kind of like on the surface argument of things, and I don't even want to talk about that too much, because it's like, okay, let's just do it instead of like talking about
well,
it. But,
I mean, yeah, but again, there's that threshold that people have to meet and overcome in order for things to happen. And as we know about anything, it's far easier to complain about things than it is to go set out and do something to change them. So let's take a look. Let's go back to your guitar playing.
okay.
Let me ask you this: Were you influenced at all by Hendrix?
Oh yeah, totally, completely.
That's a dude who made Eric Clapton get off a stage because he transcended the art of playing a guitar. It was transcendent. Okay, so I had the benefit of seeing him, not live, but he was still alive when I was coming up as a musician. So that to me was, okay, Hendrix is doing this. That was when I changed from that crappy ass folk guitar, hang down your head Tom Dooley stuff to wanting to play, get all the way up to playing as well as I didn't think I would ever be a Hendrix. And then very shortly after that, I changed to drums because guitar players got a lot of women, but drummers got them as well. But drums, that was cool for me. But that was because I saw people drumming. I saw black drummers. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. So you're right about having the examples to make people think it's possible. Look at this. We got a cool ass new generation of kids who are in elementary school who have not experienced a white president of the United States. Well, okay, a half-white president of the United States, because some people like to nitpick about nonsense. But visually, we have a black man president of the United States, and we got a whole bunch of kids who have lived that, as their growing awareness. And I think you're absolutely right that providing examples for children, for black children to go, well, so-and-so did it, I can do it. We have our black astronauts, the very few that we have, but look at how much excitement they generated in black science classes. So, with this kind of begs the question, who were your influences? Hendrix for the guitar, maybe? What about, who did you look at in filmmaking? Spike Lee was visible, but were you more aware of, Singleton, some of the other people in film, and did you, as an illustrator, did you check out, some of the black comic creators of that era? How did you? Where did you find some of the people who might have been influences for you?
As far as black creators, you kind of just mentioned it at the end there. Comic books was kind of where I really kind of found my sanctuary, and that I kind of like remember it. It was kind of like this fuzzy memory moment of walking into this comic shop in Las Vegas. Page After Page was the name of it. An amazing comic shop, probably 92, 93. And hardwood floors. It kind of had like a deck that you would step onto, and it was like they were divided up in sections. There was a lot of manga and Japanese and things like that way before it actually hit the States. And so I was just kind of like enthralled, and I remember like just flipping through all these comic books and like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm going to buy all this stuff. Turning to my right and seeing like on the shelf Static Shock, the first issue of Static Shock by Brandon Duffy, and just not really knowing how to react to it, just kind of like looking at it for a moment. And I'm like 9 or something like that. I'm like looking at this comic. I pick it up, and it's just like that was the moment, and to realize, and that was kind of like, that was definitely a moment, because it's like I picked that up, I read it, it's amazing. His writing is so natural and organic, and the characters are so like, they have so much like weight, and they're so layered and funny, and I love his writing. But
right.
And then just kind of like as a kid realize that that's not only is it like a milestone, but it's like DC also, and then they have like their Worlds Collide thing, and so that was like blowing my mind, and like, oh my gosh, crossovers. And yeah, so Dwayne was super instrumental in kind of molding that idea of like, oh, I can totally do this. And yeah, so comic books. What else? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the early influence of sci-fi films, but you got there by cover art.
Right.
You know what I mean? So okay, you were at least exposed to a lot of sci-fi films. But when you go back to think of your early influences in film, what drove that for you? What resonated with you?
As a kid, I think that okay, so there's two directors in particular, in a couple of films. One of the first films, and I've recently started thinking about this a lot, of like, wow, I thought I liked a lot of horror back when I was a kid, but a lot of it was kind of like this horror sci-fi crossover, like I mentioned earlier. There's a film in particular called Night of the Creeps by Fred Decker, and it's just this amazing, campy, cult horror sci-fi film that really got me interested in filmmaking, and sometimes when I say filmmaking, I'm thinking of kind of like atmosphere making. Like when I watch my favorite films, it kind of creates this atmosphere in my mind and in the room for me.
Right.
And that has that. Another director who's Japanese, and he's still making work as of today. His name is Kaita Mamiya, and he's also an illustrator, painter, and he does a lot of like superhero-esque work. He works mainly in film and television, but he's also done some things for like video games. But at the time, probably 95, I'm probably like butchering the dates when these films came out, but this was one of the films that would come on super late, or actually super early in the morning, when maybe Sci-Fi Channel was first starting, called Zaram. It's a film called Zaram, and just totally blown away by it. Another one of those films and this is Night of the Creeps also, with like practical effects. That's something. So anything that was like heavy practical effects, I was completely into. So Kaita Mamiya would do a lot of stuff like that, and his work still very much has that atmosphere to it. Everything's very like hands-on. Another director who's since blown up because of Spider-Man and things like that, but it was Sam Raimi. I was totally like really into his work. Evil Dead 2 specifically, because it has that kind of comical horror weird
aspect.
Yeah, that I'm completely into, and his work still is like that because it feels that way. He has that I forget what they call it. It's like a smash cam, where it's like handheld and he's running towards the subject, the actor, and so it has this very kind of like physical feel. And I love films that not only have that, but I'm also really into sound design. I realize, and I could just, for some of my favorite films, I could just listen to them because I like just the way that, however they record on whatever kind of mics they were using at the time, it just sounds really good to me. and I'm kind of wacky in some of the things some of the films that I love. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. The sound design in that film, and also even Sam Raimi's has like a huge and amazing kind of a sound aesthetic. But yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was like one of those films. But yeah, thinking back, it's like, were there any kind of Black directors other than Spike Lee that really stood out for me? And I can't really think of any. There's Julie Dash, but this is like 91 for her film, Daughters of the Dust. And seeing that as a kid, it's like my brain, I don't know if it could like really make sense of all of like the epicness that's happening in that film. But I watch Daughters of the Dust now, and it's easily one of my favorite films ever, because it's so beautiful. It's just a really beautiful film that, for me, has this kind of like fantastic feeling to it, where it could almost easily be like a sci-fi film. Just the way that they're talking, the characters interact, the clothes of the era.
Right.
Just seeing Black people on screen all the time in the way that she's showing, and in the kind of storytelling that she's doing is just beautiful. So if anyone hasn't seen Daughters of the Dust, you need to see that tomorrow, right now. You gotta see it.
Well, and it's interesting what you say, because a lot of people, even screenwriters, directors and producers, don't realize that the soundtrack of a film, in terms of its manipulation of the audience, is even more important and more compelling than the visuals that are on the screen. Low frequency sounds. I remember somebody going, let's see, where were we? We were at Epcot, and they had a big exhibit on Foley, and you would put these headphones on, and then you would hear someone doing a blow dryer, pointing a blow dryer at you, and the vibrations just in your ears were so compelling that you would feel like somebody was actually blowing air on the back of your head and things like that, just because the sound was so well tuned. Hold on 1 second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. If you're picking this up as a podcast and you don't belong to BSFS, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, shame on you. Log on, sign in, and actually partake of probably more content, more science fiction, fantasy content, artwork, discussions than you will find anyplace else on the internet. And I dare say that this is the best interview show, certainly in our genre, in the world, because I've been looking, and to have a 2-hour opportunity to get to know somebody is something that's pretty rare. I've been interviewed on radio and television, and if I get 12 minutes, I'm lucky. So everybody tune in with that. Can we switch gears for a second and talk about some of the things you've done, like Noise Gate?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the film and what its evolution was?
Well, most, if not all, of my work usually starts off with a drawing, or with a sequence of drawings, and I guess kind of like the base inspiration for Noise Gate is, I suppose, like a combination of a 90s sci-fi show called Sliders and Stargate. And this is me kind of really pulling from like my visual wantingness until I create something. And it was very much an experiment for me, because I wanted to create something that was kind of very heavy and texture-oriented and had layers as far as the language and how the story is being told, and also there's Japanese subtitles as well. But it's got elements from those things. My favorite sci-fi show is Sliders, even though after season 3 it gets like pretty bad. But yeah, Noisegate just kind of came out of that, and like I needed to see something that was extremely it was interesting and extremely weird at the same time. And it was also an opportunity for me, and I didn't realize this before I began it. It was an opportunity for me to design costumes, and ever since that film, I now realize that I have a passion for costume design. But yeah, it was definitely about it's a film about like exploration and displacement and kind of finding in the subtitle, the summary, the log line. I would say that it's the scientist, and he's in search of something called the noise gate, which is like the ultimate reality, and kind of like playing with the idea of like what is real, what is reality, and like searching for that, searching for one's kind of perception of their world, their reality.
Right.
And so that's what that's all about.
Well, somebody posted in the chat room. They wanted to thank you for making something where the characters look like us and we don't die.
Right. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. We all know all the black guys on Star Trek died, by the first commercial break, and they were all wearing red shirts for the most part. They did have, Daystrom and some other black characters, but the joke that Richard Pryor said, he'd been watching all these these science fiction movies, and they didn't plan to have us around. Which goes back to your original premise of, when our kids see something and see something that's possible and see us in it, it spurs creativity. And when you have a whole genre, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to just kind of like interject that there is a Star Trek Enterprise episode where Anthony Montgomery, the actor Anthony Montgomery, plays Travis. There's like an alternate universe episode where he is like a red shirt. I'm kind of spoiling this for people, but it's pretty awesome because he doesn't die and he gets the girl, and it's just kind of like hilarious, but it's really awesome too. And Anthony Montgomery is an awesome actor. And yeah, but continue. Sorry, I was thinking about that.
No, that's fine. So what's been the response to Noisegate?
It's been good. It's been really good, and it was kind of like an interesting test for me to kind of put something out there that did feature us, and that was kind of strange in its way. We're just talking about music and things. There's been like people love the music, people love the soundtrack, which yeah, I feel like it makes the film. And what else? Oh, I feel like it took about a year for it to get legs, and for people to really kind of like want it and want to like screen it. So it took about a year, and then people would contact me like, oh, we'd love to screen it at this film festival or at a gallery showing. And sometimes I'll just see it pop up randomly in places. I did just this week a Afrofuturist mixer with Afrofuturism LA. So kind of shout out to them because it was a really amazing event. But before I had met the person who had put it on, he put on like a montage of like Afrofuturist sci-fi and other kind of clips of things. And my film Noisegate was in there, and I was like, wow, like didn't know. But yeah, so the response has been really good. People have been wanting more. I'm kind of that guy, just to let everybody know that I kind of want you to want more. But I want to do it right also. And, you know, it's like I'm not having like millions of dollars for a budget, but I feel like it has to feel right for me, and it just has to feel right. And so I would love to make more. The actors were amazing. Yeah, it was just a really good experience, but the response has been really cool. People want more, which is good, which is really good. And yeah.
Do you feel that you have avenues to funding in order for you to make more? I mean, is the enthusiasm for what you've done already, will it manifest itself into some financial support so that you can make more and eventually, you know, climb into bigger and bigger budgets? Are you seeing that kind of support?
I definitely am, and I'm really glad too, because it's like right now at this moment, it's like I want to make that next thing. I'm not super hung up on making features or anything like that, although I do want to make a feature very soon here. But I feel like I've been able to kind of through especially through NoiseGate and through XARA, and even through my music video work and things like that, I've been able to kind of create not just like a fan base, but almost as kind of like street credibility at least, you know? Like people that don't necessarily connect with me or add me on Facebook or anything like that, they're still watching what I'm doing. And it's like if I do connect with someone that wants to support, you know, like a producer or even through like a Kickstarter campaign or something like that, it's like I have this kind of, this is what I do. You know, I make sci-fi, and yeah, this is what I do. So I feel like that's going to happen soon, to where it's like, you know, I can do those next steps of like, oh, do something that's $10,000. Oh, and then do something that's $100,000. Oh, and now it's $1 million, and you know, onward from there. Yeah, and I'm excited about that because, again, I want to bring people together in order to make these productions happen. Yeah, to make communities. I've worked in the industry since I graduated Cal Arts, and unfortunately, it is very much kind of like this wolf pack mentality, and it's really difficult to get in there. You know, it's unfortunate to say, but if you're not like straight white male, then it's really difficult to get in there. So I'm kind of I'm really interested in what that looks like as far as like an actual legit. Well, legit can be a lot of things, but like a film crew with just people of color, I feel like it's so important. We need us, you know, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera also. And when I do go that route to obtaining more money and more funds, it's like that's who I want to work with, you know, because it's just we're not being worked with. You know, you see all these crew photos of not just film productions, but all kinds of other things, video game productions and things like that, and it's we're not there, we're not represented, and whether or not we're going after that, or we have like that drive,
right?
It's like we also just need to get the opportunity to do that, but also to make it ourselves. And not to necessarily wait for that opportunity, but to make it ourselves. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make an opportunity not only for me, but for other people, and for us to learn the process for these tools to tell stories.
You know, part of that I think is there's stigmas, there's custom, there's like you said, single white male, straight male syndrome. There's all kinds of things that work against independent projects out on the West Coast, specifically in the LA area. They have a formula, and they try to apply that formula to everybody else. If you don't fit that formula, they're going to bang on the corners until you fit. We're a little bit luckier here in Chicago. I know easily a dozen black filmmakers here who are constantly making films, who are actually getting, $10,000 here to do a film, and it climbs, the different amounts of money. I've been exceedingly lucky. I've got a $2.5 million budget for a feature film that I'm hopefully going to be able to pull off next year. But that's an outlier. That's an exception to the rule. But the way I did it was different than most people. I didn't crowdfund it or anything like that. But still, we're away from LA. We're away from the studio system, and it seems to work a lot better to our benefit. What are some of the challenges that you face that constantly just pull you back even after you make a couple steps forward? What makes it so hard out there?
Let's see. Okay, wait. I want to, because my brain's like jumping around. So, you're in Chicago?
Yeah, I am. Yes, I've got an ankle bracelet on, which makes me available for this show every Friday evening. So, never mind. We don't want to talk about that. But yeah, I'm here in Chicago. Like the woman who wrote the book on Afrofuturism, Natasha Womack, she's getting ready to film a sci-fi feature in the next few weeks, and I'm not privy exactly to what her budget is, but the script is good. She's being very, very good with her resources, and she's gonna be doing that sci-fi film. Mine's not sci-fi. Mine's a comedic bank heist movie, because I want to get more money back from it. But I'm just being honest, man. A good comedic bank heist movie with a multicultural cast can actually get foreign distribution if the humor is done right.
Go ahead.
So I go after low-hanging fruit. My second and last movie project is going to be an urban adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Where you got blacks and Latinos working at an outdoor car wash in the middle of the winter. I can't think of a more miserable job than that. But the comedic possibilities are great, and they're going to have either a Pakistani or an Indian as a guy who owns the business. And he's going to have to go through Christmas past, present, and future, and a couple of those angels or whatever, ghosts that take him through the past, one's going to be lesbian, one's going to be gay. We're making an urban adaptation of a movie. And the cool thing about that is, and I don't even mind talking about it because, maybe somebody steals the idea, but the fact of the matter is that's low-hanging fruit, and I'm a low-hanging fruit guy. I'm very, very much like Tyler Perry, but I don't wear a dress because I want to do films that have popular appeal and have a definite audience, so that people who fund me will get their money back and be happy with the funding. And that's a tough thing for you, because that money out there, I'm imagining, unless you crowdfund something, is very, very tough to come by. I mean, how is it? I mean, how did you find looking for money out in the Hollywood environment?
Well, this definitely goes back to the challenge. One of the challenges is how am I doing this? I think it's just for me personally, it's being consistent with my work and being very visible and vocal about, I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm making stuff all the time, and so the opportunity arises for someone to support a film. I feel like they'll be more apt to do so. But before that, I've been funding my own stuff just straight out of my pocket. But I'm just kind of like hoping, banking on consistency, and we'll see how that goes. But like you said, for me, I'm doing stuff that's way more like a little more out there, I guess, than like bank heist and things like that, which I love those kinds of films also. But I'm also interested in kind of pulling the kind of familiar storytelling aspects and adding other elements of like my weirder work as well. I'm, like I said before, in my life I love like road tripping, but I love road films. So I'm working on a project that incorporates elements like that. Speaking of like just because I was like, oh, Chicago, Boston, but then Boston's like close by to you. But I was thinking of a filmmaker. Sorry, my brain's jumping around. I was thinking of a filmmaker. Her name is Demaine Davis, and this kind of goes back to like who inspires me, or who did inspire me at that time when I was younger. Demaine Davis co-directed a film called Black, White, and Red All Over. That's just this incredible like urban jazz character piece. It's amazing. Her film after that was called Lift, and it stars like a young Kerry Washington. But her mood inspires me to continue to make films, and she's just a really cool person. But consistency. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I don't pay any attention to this show whatsoever, so don't ask me to go back. If I start paying attention, then I'd have to study and do research and stuff like that, and I really like to keep it organic. No, it's basically, the challenge for all of us is being able to find funding to be able to do the things that we want to do, because everything takes money. And you can only go to the well so many times with your friends, and say, hey, could you help a brother out, and help me with this movie? I think Go ahead.
I think another thing that's also just been a part of like who I am, and maybe that's been apparent through just how I've been talking about things in my life and projects, but I'm gonna do the project regardless,
Right.
Like, I'm not necessarily so into like, oh, I did this project for only like $100. I'm not really that guy, because it's like I'm not really trying to do a project for $100.
Right.
But with whatever I have to work with, I'm gonna work with it. If I've just got my two hands and number 2 pencil, I'm going to use that to make that $200 million thing that seems totally out of reach. It's going to happen.
Sure.
In some kind of way, it's going to happen. So yeah.
No, and that's how we have to do it. You can't not do it just because there's a couple of things in your way. And I think, again, this goes back to how you do things and how you've done things all your life. You've just decided, well, hey, I'm going to do this, and you go and do it. And there's no better praise for a creative than someone who decides, hey, this is what I'm going to create. And then they go and they set out to do it. And we have to be creative in that 80-20 way. The 20% creative part, and then the 80% business part. You still have to be creative on both sides of that. Just because it's business doesn't mean that you can't be creative. I did a production trailer, a $65,000 production trailer, and I actually got it done for $130 worth of food. So.
Awesome.
Sometimes that's how you have to do it. The other thing I'd like to know, I know how we have symposiums, we have panel discussions, we have discussions about Afrofuturism, both online, on the air, and certainly here in Chicago. And you mentioned that you had, what was that, at Afrofuturism? Was it a panel or a convention, or what was it that you went to?
It was a mixer, Afrofuturism.
A mixer,
LA.
okay.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I kind of felt like I was the only Afrofuturist, I suppose, that was kind of more on the tip of like just like sci-fi and comic books and things like that. Everyone else was like into like engineering or like multi-level management or working with numbers or something like that. It's like, yes, I'm interested in afros and in the future, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I draw superheroes, and so I was like the only person there that was like that. But it was more of like kind of a networking mixer, and it was amazing. And I know that it's gonna grow into something else that's even more inclusive to even other things that maybe not people on the might not think that are like, oh, that's not Afrofuturist, but it totally is. So yeah.
Well, I mean, do you mind having a short discussion about what Afrofuturism, as the word, the term, the genre, the gestalt? What does Afrofuturism mean to you as somebody who is a Black creative? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to generate a discussion. You know what I mean?
Sure. For me, it's utterly and completely about, trying to get my words together. It's about being like seen, I suppose, or seeing oneself.
Yeah.
And this is kind of connecting to what I was saying earlier about like self-perception, and you got to see those people that look like you, on some level to be kind of inspired by that. I feel like Afrofuturism for me, it's just becoming more visible in the world, especially in the world today, because I'm going back again, because not being able to constantly see ourselves on the big screen, on billboards, and these kind of different avenues of like superheroes and scientists and animators and presidents and things like that. It's like now is the time for sure, because of how accessible the internet is and images, and being constantly, especially here in LA, being constantly barraged by images of other, and for me, it makes me feel, and I'm more aware of this than maybe a child would be or something, or maybe not aware of this kind of like feeling deleted, in the world, and
right.
Not existing at all. So I feel like Afrofuturism is just kind of like another part of that, of like staying alive and being seen and seeing oneself. And then on the surface, it's like I just want to see like more Black superheroes. I want to see more Black women flying around with capes, and Black men, and I want to see all that all the time. Like the fact that that's not happening like every day it's just like it's got to happen. So
well,
yeah.
I've been thinking about this, and one of the things that I've constantly said, at least in the last couple of years, is that Afrofuturism as a medium for vis-a-vis American culture has to take off for I think two reasons. The first is that typical American entertainment culture is completely absent of any originality whatsoever. Completely. When was the last time you saw something completely original in film? And I will tell you what I think it was. Last time we saw something completely original, and then they've made so many clones of it, was the Blair Witch Project. It wasn't good, but it was something nobody had ever seen before on film.
Right.
And so look at how many copies they made. That, you know, Cloverfield, whatever, you know, white folks holding a camera, recording their lives, you know, that kind of stuff. But where is the originality coming from? Well, it's not coming from comic book movies. And every single comic book movie and every single franchise that made money in the 70s and the 80s is having to be rebooted because the storyline played out, and the only way they could do it is, well, we've got this person that you loved, you know, this Batman guy, and now we're going to put him in a whole different, he's going to have a whole different origin, and he's going to end up doing all these different things, and it's because they've lost their creativity. You know, people have said to me, well, they're risk averse. You know, they're spending millions of dollars to make movies, and they want to make sure that they make money. But, you know, when they did Alien, nobody had ever done that. You know, basically it was what, kind of almost, well, not like the Thing in space, but it was new. But when was the last time we saw something new? I mean, we saw, what was that thing with Dallas Buyers Club boy, that actor out in space? And Interstellar?
Interstellar. Oh my gosh. Are we talking about that?
Yeah, and they went through that whole movie, and then they went, oh, we don't know how to end this thing. We don't have an ending for this. So let's make some really stupid shit up. Excuse me. And so you have all of these, you have thousands of creative ideas coming out of the genre of Afrofuturism. And I believe that, you know, Hollywood greed being what it is, eventually they're going to gravitate to some of the best ideas because, you know, black comics are getting traction. You know, the kind of work you're doing, you know, if your production values are kept up and they're great and you pay attention to sound and things like that, they're going to pay attention when people find you and start checking you out. So I think there's an opportunity for it's really kind of picking up because it's so readily apparent that all Hollywood can make at this point in terms of movies is destruction porn. Okay? That's all that's coming out of the big studios is just destruction porn. I mean, how many people died in that last Superman movie? You know, I'm thinking 500,000-600,000 at least. And that's somehow, you know, the Avengers movie before the last one. How many people died in New York? You know, it's just busting up stuff, explosions, and don't get me started on Michael Bay. But there's no creativity. So I think again, you're on the cusp of being at the right place at the right time for things to happen. Because, you know, as much as they don't want to admit it, you know, everybody's desperate for content because content is king. So this is my hope. I'm hoping to see, you know, filmmakers like you and Yatasha who are making, you know, black sci-fi movies start to get visibility. And as far as you're concerned for yourself, let's talk about the 80% of what it takes to get things done, which is the business aspect. For you, when you think about how you're going to fund and market, let's say, you know, how you know, look at Noisegate. What was your method? What was your thinking in terms of getting people to actually see it?
Well, for the method to get people to actually see it was pretty simple. I just kind of threw it online. But that was an intentional method because I felt like, and this is connecting to everything we've been talking about, I felt like people just needed to see it and have it be readily accessible. I have a lot of really amazing filmmaker friends that go the route, which is a totally viable route to do this. They go the route of like making money and things like that through only screening their work via film festivals and things. but then it kind of makes it really difficult to see the work or share the work. And so I just kind of felt like just put it out there for people. And that's where I kind of go back and say where it took about a year for it to actually gain legs and for people to be like, hey, I want to screen your film. And it literally was a year, and I just got bombarded with emails from all over the world about like, oh, you know, we're doing an Afrofuturist thing in the UK, or we're doing one in New York, we're doing one in Chicago. And yeah, so I'm just really, that's my thing, just give it to people, because even though I can have it just be online and ready to watch without you having to pay anything or go to a indie theater or anything like that, it's still tough for people to watch your work, I guess, you know.
It's very hard to get eyes on it. See, this is the challenge that everybody has. You know, okay, they'll go into Hawk, they'll call all their friends, they'll get their parents to give them money to do a movie, and they do it well. And then once they do it, the challenge is, how do you get people to see it? Yes, you could just tell everybody on Facebook, which are supposedly, you know, basically all of your friends, go look at my movie. But you know, the challenge is getting those eyes. And you know, do you have kind of like a plan for increasing the number of eyes who actually see what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, this is just through networking.
Right.
And networking with the right people. And it's not, I was just thinking about this earlier, it's not like necessarily who you know, but also who you know and who you actually vibe with or get along with. You can know the right person, or the person with tons of money, or the person that has access to a giant website that millions of people view, but if you're not really vibing with this person, then it's just not going to happen. So just networking, really good networking, and
accumulating the numbers as well as you can.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a good message for others to hear. You know, because there are so many people who think that there's a shortcut, that there's an easy way to do it. And my example is, you know, when I coach tennis, you know, these college kids would come to me and go, you know, how do I get to hit a ball the way you do? And I said, so you want the secret? And they go, yeah, we want the secret. I said, okay, guys, come on in. I'll tell you the secret, but you have to promise not to tell anybody else. And they say, you know, and then they go, okay, yeah, what is it? I go, you know, you have to hit 1,000,000 balls. And then they look at me like, you know, that's no secret. And I go, you know, a lot of times it's not a secret. It's just hard work. And it sounds like for you, the hard work is just keeping a steady flow of product that you're associated with, that you produce and things like that, and building a body of work that shows people that you're not a flash in a pan and that you work hard to produce what you produce. Go ahead. Yeah.
And also, it's about the body of work and consistency and things like that. But more recently, I've been fully focused on, like, you know, what's everyone say about like good filmmaking is that I'm just trying to like tell a really good story and have characters that people actually care about. I don't know if I've necessarily hit on that in my past work, because I was more experimenting with just like the visual and the sound elements and things like that. But now it's like I'm super focused on developing really deep characters, and I really want people. I want you to like cry and laugh and to be moved every time you watch my work. And so that's another thing I guess I'm kind of banking on. You know, it's like I can do visual stuff, I can do VFX and things like that, but and that's what people say about, you know, huge Hollywood stuff. You can have $1 million Michael Bay explosions, but if I don't care about the characters, then it's like I've totally forgotten that film.
Right.
Yeah.
And the essence, the essence of anything creative like that is telling the story. Whether it's a good story or a bad story does make a difference. So does this imply that you are going to be, are you a screenwriter at this point? Do you consider yourself a screenwriter? You've obviously done the work, but it's not one of the credentials that's headlining. For you to do these stories, you've already said that it's important to tell a good story and to create characters that people care about. Is this another organic skill that is added to your repertoire?
Well, yes, there's like a two parts to this question. Yes, I'm totally, and for this, it's very much I'm interested in enhancing my ability to write.
Sure.
Because I don't know if I'm the most like natural storyteller. So I'm very much interested in enhancing that ability to write. And at CalArts, I actually wrote a feature-length script, like a feature-length, really expensive science fiction script that I've just been kind of like holding on to until the day comes where I can actually make it the way I would really like to make it. But also the second part to this is that even within all these things that I do, illustration and costume design and direction and all this stuff, I'm still reaching out to other people. It's like I for sure realize that I can do it all, but I'm not trying to do it all because it's so extremely exhausting. I'm really excited, especially this summer, to connect with other people, other writers. I've crossed a few people. I've run across a few web series where the writing is just like amazing, but maybe the video, like the cinematography or the sound, isn't as on point. And it's like, man, I could probably help them out. They could help me out, and we've got a collaboration going on. And they can learn from me. I can learn from them. That's what really excites me about any kind of like future projects that I have coming up. Yeah.
And you don't have, it sounds like you welcome good, positive collaborations because, there are a lot, there's a whole school of thought out there where people just keep stuff to themselves so that, the pie is all theirs or all the credit is theirs or, it feeds their ego or things like that. But it sounds very much to me like the networking is as important as getting it done or an essential component of getting it done.
Yeah, I feel like we've all got that bit of ego going on, but at some point it just becomes exhausting, and we're all here telling stories. I run across a lot of really cool stuff coming from the Black community online that I'm just like, that's so amazing. And it's like I try to support as much as I can, but at the same time I'm also trying to do my own thing. So it's kind of like trying to find that balance between the two. And also, speaking about balance, and this is kind of going back again as far as like Afrofuturism and what I feel like that is, and being seen and seeing oneself and things like that. I do have a worry that because Afrofuturism is becoming like a thing, it's obviously becoming a thing. It's becoming really popular, almost in the same effect that Afropunk has become like very much out there in the mainstream world. There are elements of it that I think that Hollywood or straight white men can take and kind of use us in order to drive their stories. And that's not to say I really feel like anyone should be able to make a story about whoever, no matter the color of their skin or the gender or anything like that. I just really, really would like a balance of like the amount of creators that are creating, a certain type of story or does that make sense? I think
no, it does. It does.
Yeah, that's
well,
just my one worry.
You know, we all know about the formulas that Hollywood uses in order to even consider something. You know, you have to they go by the log line. They want to hear what it's like. Well, the movie is like Terminator, but with midget roaches, you know, or whatever. And look, in a Hollywood industry where they can make a Sharknado 3,
right?
Anything's possible. It's not probable, but it's possible. And then you know, here's the thing about Sharknado. It is so camp that you have A-listers wanting to be in the movie. And if you have A-listers wanting to be into your movie, that's great. You know, one of the things I think people should take note of is the latest indie movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in it, and I can't remember what the title is because I'm old. But
is it Maggie or?
Yeah, Maggie. Yeah. And the buzz on that is pretty good in terms of, you know, it having been executed well. And he was drawn to the project because he liked the writing, and maybe he wanted to not play a robot for a change. But there are opportunities out there, you know, to try to get people who can attract attention to your work for funding and for viewing. And all of those, I mean, we're going to cheat for ours. I'll be very honest. We found a very easy way to get A-listers to do a cameo in a movie. And you offer them $10,000 for 4 hours worth of work, and then they'll come and sit their ass in a chair and do that work. But that's not available to everybody. I mean, you know, when you talk about paying somebody for $10,000 for 4 hours worth of work, that's a considerable amount of money out of an independent budget, especially if someone's starting up. So that's not an avenue that works for everybody. If you were to cast yourself, let's look 5 years down the road. Let's hear where you think. I mean, given where you're going, and given how hard you've worked to not only master your craft, but at least get your name out there, where do you see yourself, you know, maybe 5 years down the road? What do you think might change by then?
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know, I'm probably going to be pretty huge, William. No, I'm kidding.
Well, look, if you keep your caloric intake low and do a little bit of exercise, you can stave that off for a little while.
Oh, yes. I love it. That was good. I feel like I'm going to be in a pretty good place because, speaking on just that feature that I'm working on, I think it's probably, and this is just me being really confident in the project, I feel like it's going to hit on all the right notes for people, and I don't want to talk too much about it now, but
no. But I mean, but see, that's fully justified for you to say that because you've already demonstrated that you will do whatever it takes to make it happen. So for you to sit there and say, well, you know, I'm going to blow up in 5 years, I would be more likely to believe that is not only possible but probable, because I know you'd bust your ass to do that. You know what I mean? So it in no way is that. I don't think that's crazy, but you know, try to remember the little people. You know, like the people who interview you for a couple of hours when you go along, and see if you could drag them along with you. But I mean,
of course.
And your feature film, what do you think, ballpark, what do you think that budget is going to be like? Is that a $100 million budget? Is that a $50 million budget?
Oh, my gosh.
Well, no, I mean, think about it. I mean,
Sure.
if you've thought about it, you know exactly what kind of special effects you need to have. You know the kind of, how many A-listers do I really need? Do I need one? Do I need two? Can I get away with five? What's our shooting schedule going to be? Are we going to go be doing this for 2 months? Am I going to have to cut it down to 4 weeks? So don't play coy with me.
No, yeah, I'm
what are you looking at?
I'm going to be totally real with you. I mean, in the millions would sound good, but for this project, which is going to be happening like super soon, I feel like in between 100 and 500,000, I could totally do it. And I'm already looking not necessarily at like A-list actors, but I have actors in mind that have been in other things that I would really love to be a part of this project. But I'm also very much interested and kind of love the performances of non-actors or very much like upcoming actors.
Sure.
So I want to kind of mix the two.
Would you consider filming away from the West Coast, because then your dollar goes further?
Yes, definitely. I bet, yeah, there's some things in the works. Maybe not necessarily for the feature. It could work for the feature that I'm thinking about, but for other projects, for sure. I was living in Mexico last year for 6 months, and
I'm sorry?
I was living in Mexico last year for 6 months.
No, I heard you. I'm just sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm really bad. I apologize to any Mexicans who are listening to this. I don't mean anything bad about your country. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Donovan.
Mexico is extremely beautiful and extremely warm to my ideas as far as creating a short piece that I just recently put online called XARA, YAOCIHUATL. And I'm totally, it actually, I felt, although it was a small crew, it just felt like so much easier to do. People were just so like down to
accommodating.
Yeah, completely. So I working overseas internationally is something that's definitely on my mind. I'm in the process of learning Japanese right now for this next year, because I am totally really considering moving to Japan for a few months next summer and possibly shooting things out there. But in the process, in between all of this craziness, awesomeness, I'm going to be working on this feature. But yeah, shooting overseas is totally doable. Yeah, and Nigeria's got Nollywood, and I totally need to go there and experience that, and maybe make some work over there as well. I'm trying to make work all over the place. New Zealand has a really interesting production.
Yeah, they do. Look at all of the facilities that Peter Jackson had built down there.
I've seen all of those behind the scenes Hobbit videos, and they look incredible. And it's stuff like that where it's like, we need to do that. We need to be able to continuously every year pull communities together so you know each other, your family. You might meet someone on set that you fall in love with, and you make a film, and next year you come back and you make the sequel, or you start prepping for the sequel. I want that, you know. And it's been
no, I understand. No, I mean that makes perfect sense. I mean, for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm very happy to do this feature in Chicago, and we do have. I wrote a script for a sequel, which would be equally easy to do here. And if the first one makes money, then I know that they'll do the sequel. But you're right. Having a core group of people that not only you can count on, but that you can work well with together, I think is essential for the independent artist, because, you know, a studio can throw millions of dollars at something, and if you don't fit in, they kick you to the curb in a heartbeat and go grab somebody else who can do the exact same thing. But when you work the way you're working, having your core group of people who you do count on, I think is very important. Excuse me. When you went to Mexico, you brought your own people with you down there, and did you work with some of the people there as well?
No. I went down as a solo independent artist. And
just by yourself?
Just by myself. And I quickly wrote up, which is probably not the best, I quickly wrote up a short film, but it had, like I was saying before, it had been something that I had been conceiving for a while through sketches and concept art and things like that of like this woman warrior. And it was like, hey, this is after visiting, the pyramids and just kind of being in the culture and amongst the people. I just felt like, I need to do this here right now, while I have the opportunity. And it just super came together. And I'm a PC guy. I feel like I see in chat, there's someone asked me if I was Mac or PC.
Oh, you jumped in there. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm a PC man too, but my laptops are always Macs, and then I load on a good version of Windows for the couple of programs that just don't run in the Mac environment. BlackScienceFictionSociety.com is in the process of doing their first 3D animated movie, and Jarvis has put together a studio where he wants to be able to have the resources for BSFS people to do, their own movies, their own videos, and things like that, and have that as a resource of BSFS. So, I mean, not that you have to, not that you want to, but I mean that's something that's definitely in the cards. And you're right, creating our own small communities where we can actually have creatives and the technical people to help get things done, where we know where we can go find people that we can trust is huge. Do you have any desire on your own to go and perhaps create your own studio?
Yeah, that's kind of like the dream, I suppose, is to have a really sizable production facility with all those things that we would need, giant green screen and, just space. Space is just space. To be able to do
No, you're right.
Build set, equipment, proper film equipment, just that whole thing. And for people not just to have that and then just to have it be super exclusive and, all this big actors here, we have to have it closed off. I really want to bring the community in, bring super young people in, like kindergarten, and show the process of that. I go around Long Beach and LA looking at empty space, all these empty building spaces, and it's ridiculous. And it's like I'm moving there little by little. It's I see it, and that's kind of something that's exciting to me. But yeah.
And I don't know because I'm not out there, but given what you want to do, I know that your drive is going to make it successful. But what do you see as maybe your biggest challenge to putting your own studio together, let's say in the next 5 years?
I'm not necessarily totally sure. I think just off the top of my head would just be because I'm not as extremely business-minded oriented as I would like to be, and that's where I would have to bring someone else in to handle all like the logistics and paperwork and that end of it. I think that's pretty much it. I think just actually going for it. Someone in chat saying money, but yeah, money also. But just going for it and like stepping outside and going to the downtown city hall thing and getting paperwork and signing things and just kind of putting yourself in that process, I think is like the biggest hurdle for anyone.
Well, let me mention something to you that might influence you. Here in Illinois, we give very, very generous tax credits for any production over $50,000, and then the next step is any production over $100,000. So if you're doing a production here in Chicago over $100,000, you get a 30% tax credit. Okay, and those tax credits are transferable. So for people who may want to invest in your projects, that's an extra incentive for them to do so, because those tax credits, and the tax credits sell for 90 cents on the dollar. So with speculative money, where the minimum you have to pay back is 30%. So, you borrow $100,000 from somebody, normally for film production, they're looking at getting a 30% return on their money. You can not only give them the 30% return on their money, but you could toss them some of those tax credits to sweeten the pot. I don't know if California has anything like that. I don't think they do, because this is why productions are being drawn to, let's see, Illinois, Tennessee, and Louisiana. I think all three of those have generous tax credits for movie production. So, I mean, it's something to think about. You've talked about going overseas to do some of your movies, but, there may be some advantageous places across America that may help you out as well. And if you do anything here in Chicago, I'll take you to lunch. That's a given.
Sounds awesome.
Well, no, I mean, it's cool. I mean, the best part for me is being able to interview people who do some really incredible things, and getting to know them, not because of what they can do for me, but getting to know them to keep track of where they're going and how they grow, I think is the best part of what I've been able to do with being associated with this show. So, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes here. I'd like to ask you 2 questions that you can tell people about. One is, in doing all the things you've done, what is the worst part of what you've had to do in order to get to be successful at the things that you have already been successful at? What's the worst part that you've had to meet or overcome in order to get where you are today? Or even the worst lesson you learned?
Well, William, that's an interesting question, just because I feel like what I'm about to say is it's kind of like it's like, for me, the worst part, but also in some aspects it's the best part. And that's just no. Tell us. I mean, let the people know, because a lot of people are either going to follow in your footsteps or made base decisions on. There are some actual people who learn from other people's experiences. So, I mean, what is it that was both? That kind of both hit both sides of that coin for you? Yeah, well, I feel like it's definitely every time it's a self-doubt. And it'll hit me at the worst times within creating anything, especially a film. But sometimes, again, it'll be the best time, because at that moment I'll have to choose to be courageous and to champion that self-doubt. And that kind of is what makes the experience for me. I feel like maybe I wouldn't do this art if I had, like, there were no doubts about it, or if I was never afraid to do it. It's like, this is every moment I experience that those hurdles, it kind of shapes who I am, and it shapes not only who I am, but the work that I do, and the people around me, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, excuse me.
This is super. I'm so sad that we've only got like 1 minute left, because this has been extremely amazing, and I love the show. I've been listening, and you're an amazing host, and I love your questioning. It's so like personal and perfect, and the humor is awesome. And thank you again. Thank you, Jarvis. Thanks to everybody. This has been awesome.
Well, first of all, you honor me greatly. I mean, you really do, because, you know, like I said, I don't pay attention. I'll tell everybody something honestly that I normally don't tell anybody. I have never listened to an episode of this show because I so hate my voice. I despise how I sound, you know, in the recording. So I've never listened to a show.
I think you sound awesome. It's like super distinct and like very intelligent and like real. You sound good, man.
Well, thank you. You know, you could fool some of the people sometimes, you know. But here's the thing I want to remind you. I mean, you're out and about. You're doing things. So try to think about like the BSFS events calendar. If you're going to be at a convention or something like that, put it in the events calendar so people who may have a weekend free or may be nearby can check you out and meet you in person. I think that's the coolest part about the events calendar. So try to remember to post up any of your appearances where you might be either showing your wares or even just going for a networking meeting where you're the only Afrofuturist. Maybe we'll get another Afrofuturist to show up for you, to hang out with you. So that's really important. And of course, I want to thank you for doing this. I hope it didn't seem like a 2-hour trial to you.
No, I'm super sad that it's over.
But seriously, as you go along, as you do new things, you know, we're going to start recycling people who have been on earlier shows because we want to see where they've gone and what new things they've done. But again, you've made this really easy for me, and that's you know, some people out there know what I'm talking about when some of the guests are not as easy to deal with. But this has been a joy. And Donovan, this has been great. And I'm serious about the thing about, you know, if you get out to Chicago or if I get out there, you know, I would definitely like to do the lunch thing because I always want to try to meet the people who not only have I interviewed, but who I find interesting and certainly compelling in their field. So thank you very much for being on the show. And hopefully Jarvis isn't downstairs making a sandwich because he's the guy who's got to close out the show for us. For those of you who are listening as a podcast, we have, you've probably discovered that we've got about 2 years' worth of shows online already. And tell your friends about it. Get your creative people who are interested in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror to check out BSFS. And Jarvis, why don't you go ahead and take us home?
Hey, thanks, William. As always, I want to thank everyone for participating with this project, whether you're listening in or shared it on your social media or you were a host or a guest on the show. Donovan, man, you're super talented, and I just want to commend you on all the good stuff that you've been doing, and I want to continue to see more of that, man. I was really impressed with both of the videos that you've done. We didn't talk about it much, but the comic coloring book that you have, I mean, you're just multi-talented with all the stuff that you're doing. So hopefully we can get you back on to talk about some of the other things as well. And also, William, crazy, entertaining on the hosting end of the show. Thank you as always. And I want to continue to ask everyone to continue to support us, and we'll continue to try our best to support you with the actual website, the magazine, the radio show, the anthology series, and our new 3D film. And really quickly, before we get off the air, we're over a little bit, but that's okay. Some good news. We will be rolling out a new updated logo very soon. Just doing some final touches on that. Also, we are now a 501 nonprofit. That paperwork is done and complete and in the can. Just working out the details on that as well. And we actually have a mobile production studio. And so over the next few years, months and years, we want to give you more details on that, because what we want to do is partner with members of the site to realize some of the work that they've been writing and bring that to life on the big screen or the small screen, but in some form of video. So thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for listening. And this has been a great show, man. It's really been off the chain.
Thank you.
Yeah, and hang on just a little while after the recording stops, Donovan, and then if anybody has any last questions they want to ask, let's try to catch those in the chat room, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm finna shut it down as far as the recording, but hold on for those additional questions. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.